Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It is time to have a look at the suggestions past developers again on April 2023, and this time we're going to be covering the ground stuff. Special mention goes to the Semavente Contrary M42-4070. Won't be covering it in this article, but it is there if you want to go check it out. All the links to everything are in the description. Make sure to have a look, and let's get into it. The first vehicle is for America, and it's the M1134 Striker, but an ATGM carrier version. So in the 1990s, there was a need in the US Army for a light, mobile set of vehicles with anti-tank capabilities. The need was met by a vehicle based on the Striker ICV, the M1134 Striker. The design was built on the M1126 infantry carrier vehicle, featured an anti-tank guided missile launcher instead of a gun, and as missiles can often be used to hit a target at much longer range. The launcher was designed to launch the new TOW-2 missiles, but can fire any version of the BGM-71 TOW. The Striker entered service in 2003 and is used by the Striker Brigade combat team. Out of 300 Strikers in each Striker Brigade, 9 of them are M1134 Strikers. The MGS began production in 2002, and it supplemented the M1134 Striker in the Striker Brigade combat team. As of 2017, there are 3 platoons of Strikers and also 3 platoons of MGSs in each of these brigades, together forming a weapons troop as part of the cavalry squadron of the Striker Brigade. The weapons squadron is the effective anti-tank unit of the brigade, and it is still seeing active service as of 2020, and is also unlikely to be retired in the near future. The next vehicle is for Britain, and it is the Centurion P1, which is the original prototype of the Centurion tank. Although mostly considered a post-war tank, the Centurion's development actually began in the autumn of 1943, more than 12 months before the D-Day landings. However, none of the first pre-production vehicles made it into Europe until after VE Day, and therefore they were too late to affect the outcome of the war. Despite this, the Centurion, armed with a 17-pounder gun, was capable enough to stand up against the heavier German Tiger and also Panther tanks. The Centurion, being the final iteration of the British cruiser tank concept, went on to prove itself as one of the best tanks in the interwar period. The tank offered an excellent balance of firepower, protection, and also mobility, whilst easily being able to be up-gunned and also up-armoured. It later engaged in several conflicts, being Korea, Ardennes, India, Pakistan, the Middle East, and even Vietnam. As the name suggests, the so-called pilot Centurions were essentially pre-production prototypes of the Centurion Mk. The vehicle P1 to P10 were equipped with a 17-pounder gun as their main armament, and also featured a 20mm Polston gun as their coaxial gun. The vehicle's P11 to 15 were instead fitted with a 7.92mm Bezer machine gun as their coaxial gun. There had also been experiments with the placement of a potential second Bezer on either the backside of the turret or on the hull front. Also, the vehicles P16 to P20 were equipped with a Pow-Flow gearbox and a 77mm tank gun of the Comet. These were then designated the A41S, since the regular Centurion was called the A41. The first 6 Centurions, P1 to P6, were actually shipped to Germany, but arrived too late to see any action. The vehicle that we're looking at, though, is the Centurion Mk, which was the first prototype of the Centurion series. It would differ from the already implemented Centurion Mk in a way that it would gain the 20mm Polston coaxial gun, so that would be the main difference between them. It also seems to have a slightly different turret, but I might be wrong about that, but it would be really nice to see this vehicle at some point. For Japan, we have the Type 99 155mm self-propelled howitzer, or as it was known, the Long Nose. This was a state-of-the-art machine developed as a successor to the Type 75 self-propelled 155mm howitzer that had been operated by the GSDF artillery units. It's a self-propelled howitzer and is deployed mainly in each divisional of artillery regiment and also Northern Army Combined Brigade under the control of the Northern Army. However, with the commercialization of the Type 19 wheeled self-propelled 155mm howitzer developed as a successor to the towed version in order to prioritize the procurement budget for the new type of SPH, the production of the Type 99 has been temporarily suspended, with a total of 136 procured by 2018. The previous Type 75 self-propelled howitzer, which was formalized in 1975, has a maximum range of only 19 kilometers when using specially developed long-range ammo. On the other hand, the towed 155mm FH-70, which was also jointly developed by Britain, West Germany and Italy, which began licensed production in 1983, has a maximum range of 30 kilometers when using base bleed ammunition. Even the French-made 120mm towed mortar RT, which is deployed in infantry department units, reaches a maximum range of 13 kilometers when using rocket-assisted propellant. Maximum range is one of the most important characteristics for artillery, therefore the maximum range of the Type 75 self-propelled howitzer became unsatisfactory by today's standards, regardless of when it was developed. Therefore, from 1985, research on a self-propelled artillery to succeed the Type 75 self-propelled howitzer was started. From 1987 to 93, 5.6 billion yen was invested in long-term research and prototyping of turrets, loading devices, gun barrels, ammunition, etc. And from 1994, development began on the premise of equipping. As for prototype vehicles, 4 self-propelled guns, 2 dedicated ammunition vehicles, and 6,070 shells have been ordered for 3.03 billion yen. Japan Steel Works became the main contractor for the development of this vehicle and was in charge of the development of the main gun and turret. In addition, development was carried out by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries for the body part, Asahi Kasei for the entire shell, Nippon Yushi for the inner cylinder of the shell, and also Hitachi for the ammunition truck. Technical tests were conducted using 4 prototype vehicles until 1996, and practical tests began in the following year, 1997. And in 1999, it was formalized as Type 99 self-propelled 155mm howitzer, and the procurement of 4 vehicles was decided for the first time with the budget of the same year. The self-propelled howitzer was first shown to the public on the 12th of November 2000 at the 48th anniversary event held at the Ground Self-Defense Force Weapons School in Amimaki, Inishiki-gun, Ibaraki Prefecture. In addition, the deployment to actual combat units has started from the 7th Artillery Regiment and is being progressively deployed to divisions and brigade artillery units under the Northern Army. It seems that the deployment to mainline divisions and brigades is not currently being considered. The Type 99 self-propelled howitzer is the only self-propelled howitzer currently in use, and since the procurement price per vehicle is extremely high at 960 million yen, the number so far per year is limited from 6 to 8 vehicles. In 2001, 2 howitzers were sunk in the sea and also lost while being transported by a cargo ship in the Pacific Ocean for shooting tests in the mainland of the US. When 105 units were procured in 2013, the replacement of equipment in Hokkaido was completed, and all artillery units, such as divisions in Hokkaido, are equipped with Type 99 self-propelled howitzers. However, since the number of artillery guns was reduced to 400 in the 22nd Guidelines and further reduced to 300 in the 25th Guidelines, the Type 99 self-propelled howitzers will not be produced enough to completely replace all of the Type 75 self-propelled howitzers. The next one is of Chinese origin, and it has a bit of an odd name. It's 301 SPAAG. The, I suppose, nickname or unofficial name could be the Type 62 AA. Basically, the 301 was an SPAA based on the Type 62 light tank. The tank was armed with twin 37mm Type 65 guns in an open turret. The tank was supposed to be a mobile AA gun carrier for China, since at the time they only had static AA emplacements that could be used. The choice of using the Type 62 as a platform was an economical and also logistic choice, as well as being efficient, since they had a bunch of the holes around the place. The Type 62 was widely used in China, and also proven very good for service. The wide use of the chassis allowed a standardized idea where you could take the chassis and then add other platforms to it. The only need was to have a good turret on it. The turret was designed with simplicity in mind, and they wanted it to be a compact equivalent of the ZSU-57-2 turret. This is basically why, if you have a look at the 301, it looks very similar to the Type 80 SPAA, which was a Chinese version of the ZSU-57-2, which was based on the Type 59 chassis. Even though this project started in 1966 and looked promising, it went through 3 stages of the prototype, and the final stage, the 3 prototype, was nearly ready for production, but then the project was cancelled in 1981 as the Type 80 was already in service. The 301 never actually left prototype stage, as in 1981, Chinese had established that such SPAAGs were unfit for the Chinese army. The Type 80 SPAA was entering into production, and the Type 88 SPAA was also under development. The need of a lighter mobile SPAA to go into wetland, the southern Chinese areas, and the mountainous land of the western China was considered also unneeded, especially since the Type 80 could, but obviously not as easily, still be used in those areas. The next article we're going to read verbatim. This is the Giat T59. If you feel like this looks like a Russian tank, you are right. It is a Russian tank at the first place. A Soviet T-55 who happened to fall in the hand of Giat Industry, who was back then the main military builder for the French armoured vehicles. As Giat was in discussion with Egypt for a modernization program of T-62, who was meant to receive a French 120mm G1 gun, France went further to propose a wide similar modernization on the Type 59, who was widespread around the world. It was in 1987, during the Satori Exposition, that the tank was officially revealed to the world and offered to export. With nearly 100,000 T-54 and 55s built and over 50 countries using it, the T-54-55 is one of the most common vehicles, being used in many countries of whose France have relation. The potential of an upgrade for export was just too good. With the discussion of modernizing the T-62 for Egypt, Giat put their hand on an old T-55 and start to study the potential of a cheap yet efficient upgrade. While most countries using T-55 back then was unable to afford modern MBT, the key feature was to avoid to build a whole new tank. The chassis was unchanged, the turret as well, the engine was better to remain as it was. The T-55 was by himself not a bad tank at all, it was through and reliable, but it remained outdated. Giat proposed to fit better French armament and device. This was as much for proving this sort of upgrade was doable and to find a new potential customer. The T-55 was refitted with a French CN-105F1 and a new thermal sight. It was in overall a way to get the Type 59 a bit of French part. The gun mount was adapted to the new gun, the ammo rack as well, and the thermal sight was changed. It gave birth to the T-59, a Russian hybrid with French technology. The tank was offered to export in 1987, but without much interest. The fact is, the upgrade was not exactly an upgrade, as the original 100mm gun was comparable to the CN-105F1, and the original Type 59 could also have the thermal sight. Sadly, the Type 59 was never fitted with the 120mm G1 gun like the T-62 could have in theory. The 120mm would be likely to get a lot more interest, but the 105mm is not a bad gun either. It was at the first place done to prove it was possible to adapt a French gun in a Russian tank. Due to the lack of interest, the T-59 disappeared from the market shortly after, finding no customer of any sort. The fate of the only prototype is unknown, likely kept by Giat, now called Nexter, for testbed or just stored somewhere. Sweden gets the Pansarbil FM31 Mod 1942. The design of this actually started in early 1930s, when the Swedish army ordered the firms Bofors and Landsverk to carry out joint work on a new design of an armoured car, in which most of the parts were to be built in Sweden. The result of this development was the Pansarbil FM31, a machine created on the chassis of a 2-ton Chevrolet truck. In 1931, the prototype was successfully tested, and the army ordered 30 armoured cars. The production taken its course in 1933-34, and the F-31 went into service of 4 cavalry regiments and was actively used throughout the war. In 1940, only 19 armoured vehicles remained in working order, but in 1942, the Army demanded to re-equip the remaining armoured car with a 20mm Madsen cannon with a coaxial machine gun, the M1429. Subsequently, the FM-31 armoured cars were replaced by more modern armoured vehicles such as the Lynx, while the 19 upgraded armoured cars remained into Swedish service a few more years for anti-aircraft defence. They didn't just use the Madsen though, that was used as a prototype. They also used the 20mm Vaken M40B gun as well, alongside a 7.92mm. The next vehicle is cursed. It's the M72 Roesh. This is a weird vehicle. The British Centurion is an iconic armoured fighting vehicle that is today synonymous with the word tank. This is not only due to the British's own extensive use and modification of the vehicle, but its export record and the resulting modifications as well. One of the most well-known users of exported Centurions is Israel, the first deliveries of which arrived in the late 1950s. These were the Mark III and also Mark V varieties, equipped with 20-pounder guns. They received the name Shot, meaning whip in Hebrew. Shortly after their arrival, these tanks were upgraded with a locally produced version of the British 105mm L7 cannon. Some were then further upgraded to utilize the Continental AVDS 1792A diesel engine, and also Allison CD850-6 transmission. These further upgraded shots received the name Shot Cal, and shots retaining the Meteor engine were renamed the Shot Meteor. Though most Shot Meteors were upgraded to the Shot Cal standard by 1974, like any military, the IDF eventually ran into the need for a self-propelled howitzer. This led to multiple developments, one of which was the M72 Roesh, developed by Soltam Systems. This SPH utilized a heavily modified Shot Meteor hull and the newly developed 155mm M71 L39 howitzer, though it was initially supposed to use the 155mm M68 L33 howitzer. The installation of the turrets required the hull to be redesigned. The entire front half of the hull was removed and replaced with a thinly armoured superstructure, with the driver's hatch being relocated to the upper glacis. The turret could traverse a full 360 degrees and house up to 34 rounds, with a further 26 being stored in the hull. The vehicle underwent testing, but was not accepted into service due to the Centurion hull being outdated. This sole prototype was likely scrapped. The idea of a Centurion with a big old turret and 155 sounds very fun when it comes to War Thunder. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Millie Draper, Juan the Panda, Nick R. Kupila, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie B. Young, Peter Grayling, Jerry Provolt, Bareen, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, Derek R., and Lafouche for supporting the channel.